Welcome to the Etsy Conversations podcast, featuring inspiring interviews with Etsy shop owners, hosted by Ijama Elazu.
Hello and welcome to the Etsy Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Ijama, and I thank you for joining me for another episode of the podcast. And this week, my guest is Lesley Hayes, and she owns Artisan Analytics. You might recall from my conversation in episode 198 with Genevieve. Genevieve runs Genevieve Designs BR and all projects great and small, We talked about Etsy Analytics and Google Analytics, and she mentioned the product that she uses and the service that she uses, and it's Lesley's service and Lesley's product. So I reached out to Lesley and she said yes. And so in this episode, we're going to be talking about stats and statistics, I guess, for your Etsy shop, because that's what Lesley knows and that's what she does. So Lesley, thank you so much for being my guest and welcome.
Thanks, Ujima. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. I'm so glad that you agreed to come onto the podcast, because I know that stats are something that lots of sellers either struggle with or don't even understand. Mm-hmm. So we completely ignore them. But this is what you do, and this is what your business is focused on. So I'm really excited to have you share your knowledge on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely something that people have no idea about when they first start, that they struggle with, that can seem really confusing and overwhelming. So it's been really fun so far to talk to people and, help them understand that it's not as scary as they think it is, and it can actually be really useful.
Yeah, I like it when folks like you say something that intimidates the majority of the general population is fun, because then I know that you really know your stuff and we're going to learn from you. But before we start, can you just give us a little bit of background about you, Lesley?
Absolutely. So I live in New South Wales, Australia, with my husband and 2 dogs and 3 cows.
Cows?
So we live in the country. Yep. And I've been working in the digital space, so in web development and web project production, client management and that kind of stuff for 10 years now. I'm really lucky that I get to do this from home in the country, in the beautiful place where I live. And as part of that and being in websites, analytics naturally comes out of that. A few years ago, I started my own Etsy shop. So I crochet and I started making some jewelry pieces that I thought were really unique and I really loved them, and I thought I needed to share this with someone. So I created an Etsy shop called Little Bone Collector and set that up and realized that I could plug Google Analytics into Etsy. And so I already knew about Google Analytics and everything that it could do, and this was really exciting. I thought, what can I see in this? How can this help me in my shop? And I started looking into it and everything just sort of rolled from there. I realized I needed to help other sellers do the same thing.
So, okay. I know I'm going off track a bit, but the cows, can we talk about the cows first?
I just glossed over that. So I have 100 acres, and we have 3 cows. That's all that we can.
Are they pets or do you use them for milk?
They will breed babies for us to sell.
Oh.
But we're teaching them at the moment to eat from our hand and everything, so they will be very pet-like, but not their babies.
Do you think cows get to know people, like they'll know you as their owners, like dogs will?
Possibly. My husband has been feeding them more than I have. Mm-hmm. So when I go down, they're a bit shyer with me than they are with him. So I think that they get to know individual people.
Okay. All right. Thank you for indulging me. I was just, I like the cows. Okay, so regarding stats, first of all, I feel like if Etsy felt that it was something that would be a useful tool for us, then they would provide that information to us. And so we have shop stats. But before that, why do you say, or why do you think that data is so important to Etsy sellers? Because like I mentioned earlier, I know that a lot of sellers, and I include myself in this, sometimes we look at statistics, and because we don't really understand it, we just hope for the best and just look at the numbers that we think make sense to us, but don't really act on them and don't really respond to them. Why is the data that we're seeing so important to what we're trying to achieve as sellers?
Yeah, absolutely. So to me, it's about plugging that gap between the actions that you're taking. So it might be the marketing that you're doing, or the products that you're listing, or how you're writing the descriptions, and the outcomes that you see, basically the sales that you make. And being able to tell, is the marketing that I'm doing causing the sales or not? And at the moment, you can't actually see that, because even the Etsy Shop Stats doesn't tell you what percentage of your sales came from a particular marketing channel. You know, it's bizarre. They could just put that into Shop Stats, but they don't.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that it would be easy enough to include that information?
Well, maybe the way that they track things at the moment doesn't allow for it. But if I had been running the recent Etsy Shop Stats upgrade, I would have included that in there. So it's disappointing that they haven't. But if they're not measuring it in a way that they can, then that's probably why it's not in there.
Okay.
But to me, that's the most important thing about analytics.
Okay. That actually leads me to another question I had for you. You know, Etsy recently, and by recently I mean sometime this year, 2017, updated their shop stats feature. Do you think it's better now, the same, or worse than the old one?
It's prettier.
It is prettier.
It is. I've started writing a long article about what I think about the update. So I suppose my full opinion will come out in that. But it's not bad. I don't think it's worse. I think there are a few things that you can't see now that, you know, people are right to be worried about. But in general, it's not really any worse. But it's also not really any better.
Okay. Because
you still can't see that connection between what you're doing and the sales. But I was interested in how they removed how easy it was to see favorites, and that their statement on that was, in their own research, they noticed that favorites didn't correlate with sales. It was views that correlated with sales. And my thoughts were, well, did they take into account all the favorites that sellers give to each other in the teams? Because that would be a huge number of favorites. And of course, when those favoriting is going on, there's almost no sales going on. People aren't doing that because they really want to buy that product.
Right.
And did they actually sort of, you know, adjust their numbers to account for that? I don't know.
Okay. Now, I wonder if that's trackable, though, because I know about the team games where it's like fave 10, then put yours, and then go back and fave 5 more and what have you. But what do you think?
Well, at a very basic level, they could separate out people who have shops and people who don't, and then just only analyze favorites from buyers only.
Oh, yes, that would make sense, actually, now that you mention it. All right. So we have shop stats that Etsy provides us, and then there's Google Analytics, which is also a way of measuring what's going on in your shop. What's the difference between the two? I've read an article from Etsy, but I want to know from your standpoint, what are the main differences between Google Analytics and ShopStats, and which one of those two tools do you think is more effective for us as sellers to be looking at?
Mm-hmm. I think you need to use them in combination.
Okay.
But in general, I tend to go to Google Analytics for most things. And Google Analytics, the difference with that is that it shows cause and effect. You can follow the full pathway of someone's journey in your shop, from when they first arrived to when they got to the point of kind of making the sale, because you can't see sales naturally inside Google Analytics. Mm-hmm. And all of that information is there. You can look at the same person and look at their history of visits. Mm-hmm. And there's just a huge variety of information in there. It's much wider in terms of the detail that you can see.
Okay. I'll be honest. Now, I knew about using Google Analytics for website owners, people who run blogs and maybe do campaigns to promote a specific post or a product that they're selling. I never really fully understood how Google Analytics was beneficial to an Etsy seller, because in my head, it's not a text-based product. It's just selling items. But it sounds to me like what you're saying is the information that you can get from Google Analytics is still helpful in some way. Well, big way.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So Google Analytics can show you demographics of your visitors, male and female, age ranges, location. So you can see whether you're getting a lot of visits from a country that you don't ship to, and maybe you should ship there, for example.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Or you can analyze the search terms that people are using on Etsy to find you. Mm-hmm. And are they searching and finding you for things that you don't actually sell? That would be something to watch out for. Are people coming there looking for something that's not actually the product? Yeah. Or are they looking for gifts and you don't, that's the search term that they're using, and maybe your products aren't sort of described properly as gifts, or maybe you should be offering gift wrapping or something like that.
Oh, okay. So then enter Artisan Analytics. This is where you come in and you pull it all together for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So setting up Google Analytics for Etsy is both really, really easy and really complicated. The very basic thing that you need to do that almost everyone knows about is you get your little code and you put it into your Etsy settings. Yeah. But then this is what I noticed, the data that's in your Google Analytics account isn't right. And if you search for Etsy Google Analytics, you might find a few articles that are talking about how the sources for your traffic are the way that they got to Etsy, not your shop.
Yeah,
and this
I've
is
seen that.
Actually a big deal. Yeah. So it's not very useful to look in Google Analytics and see that you got lots of traffic from Facebook if that was to someone else's shop.
Yeah.
And then they came to you through search. That's useless. And that's why it's a good idea to check back at the sources in ShopStats, because they are by default more accurate. Okay. But one of the main things that I can do is reconfigure Google Analytics so that those traffic sources are correct, as much as can be done. Okay. And I have a blog article about how you can do it yourself, or it's the kind of setup that I can do for you.
Okay.
And then in the long term, I also have a monthly program where I'm looking forward to working with people on a long-term basis, building up a core group of Etsy sellers who really want to be data smart and data driven. Mm-hmm. And then on a monthly basis, having a whole bunch of different things they can learn, doing some one-on-one consultations and reporting and that kind of thing to sort of make sure they can see these business results over time.
Okay. And so working with you on a consistent basis to learn how to use data to better improve our sales, approximately how much time each month do you think that should take, and or how much time do you think is good enough for us to focus on our data and statistics in order to get our shops where we want them to be?
It really depends on how big your shop is.
Okay.
If you're just starting out, the only thing you need to worry about is getting visits.
Okay.
Once you're hitting, say, 2,000 visits a month, which seems quite a lot, but you really need that number to be able to make use of your data statistically. If the numbers are smaller than that, then it's sort of, you can't really say for sure that what you're looking at is real or if it's just a fluke.
Okay.
Once you're at that point, you can be looking at your data every day, really, or when you are doing something that you need to check in on the results of, or every week. But in terms of working with me with the program, if you're getting something every month, it would be maybe 3 or 4 hours a month. But I would hope that I'm teaching people to have the confidence and the tools and the skills to be using it every day or every week.
Okay. So what does working with you look like? Let's say I don't want to go in and make the adjustments to Google Analytics tied to my Etsy shop myself. What would the process look like if I were to have you just set that all up for me?
Yep. So the first thing that I do is have a conversation with you. And I just get to know your shop, what your goals are, what kind of products you sell, what your audience is. And once I have an understanding of your business, then I know what you need to be looking at in analytics for you, because it's not the same for every shop.
Oh, okay.
Then there's the basic setup, where I configure it the same way that I would for every shop. But then there's also customizing the reports. Then these are the reports that show you what you need to see.
Okay.
So based on what your goals are for your shop. And then if we want to go even further, I can give you a whole set of insights and recommendations based on those reports. And then we can move into the monthly program.
Okay. So the insights and recommendations that you would offer would be like hands-on things that you would say, okay, here's what I see going on in your shop. Here's what you need to log into your shop manager and fix and work on. Is that correct?
I can't always give people really, really specific recommendations because they're the experts in their business.
Okay.
I can tell you what I see and what I think it means. But the shop owner in the end needs to make the decision that what I've said is right based on what they know about their business, and the activities that they're taking that might be affecting their traffic. So you know what marketing you're doing. Okay. I don't know 100% what marketing you're doing. So that's kind of what my push is always. You need to interpret it yourself because you're your shop expert.
Right. Okay. All right, that makes sense. Now, I know that when you do the professional setup of our Google Analytics for our Etsy shops, one of the things that you give is 4 special Etsy only dashboards. Yeah. What are those?
Yes, so you can actually get them for free from my blog, or if you sign up to my e-course, they arrive as part of that. But they are really based on all the special configuration that I show you how to do. So if you don't feel comfortable setting that up yourself, then you would need to get me to do that before you can use the dashboards. But if you want to get your hands dirty and jump in and set it all up yourself, then the dashboards are there when you get to that point.
Okay. And so what are your thoughts when it comes to DIY versus DIFY? Well, I think I just made that up. Do it yourself versus do it for you. How much do you think we as Etsy sellers need to know? And I ask this, I'll explain why I'm asking it. I feel like I have a lot going on with, trying to run my Etsy shop and keeping up with everything that's changing on Etsy and the things that I need to do, for my own business that only I can do. If I were to hand off setting up of Google Analytics to you, do you think that you could still give me enough information to be, and by me, I'm speaking for anyone who might be considering this, do you think that you could still provide enough education to give me enough information that I need so that as we work together, I can make changes on my own and still understand some things without, getting into the weeds of Google Analytics and parts that I might not necessarily need to know, at least maybe not right now if I have other things that I want to focus on, in my shop.
It's always better to know more. And that's what I tell my clients in day-to-day life. But you're absolutely right. You don't need to know everything from the get-go.
Okay.
And if I set up everything for you, you don't need to know how to do that. You just need to know how to understand your reports.
Okay.
So that's the most important thing, how to interpret them, some sort of statistics, rules of thumb that I have that will keep you on the right path and then you don't get misled by things. And don't worry, there's no maths. But that's really the most important thing. And then if you play around and you learn how to edit the configuration as you go, then that's all the better. But it's not absolutely vital.
Okay. And I think that's, you answered it with better than I asked it was, do I really need to understand the how to when really all I want to know is understand.
Yes.
Yeah. Understand what it's telling me, not how to do the technical parts of it, which to you probably doesn't seem technical, but to me, I'm like, it's technical.
Oh, no, it is. Some of it is very technical, and that's why my instructions are often just copy and paste this. Don't worry about why it works. Okay. Because some of it can be very confusing. But it is good to understand a little bit about how it's set up, because then when you see something that looks weird, you might know why.
Okay.
So if something goes wrong, you might be able to tell that it is wrong or why it's wrong, and how to sort of fix it in how you're interpreting it, even if you don't go into the configuration and fix it.
Okay. And so one of the things that you said is that shop stats and Google Analytics work, well, as a seller, I need to use the information from both of them. Once I have Google Analytics set up and shop stats is already there, ideally, what do you recommend for us as sellers to be looking at when we have the two, and when? Like, what parts of shop stats should I pay more attention to, and what parts, does Google Analytics handle better? And so then I should be referring to that source instead.
Once you have Google Analytics configured and you've got the right traffic sources, you can see engaged visitors, you're tracking all your marketing correctly using special tags. The only thing you need to use shop stats for is actual sales. If you want to get really tricky, you can import those sales into Google Analytics. But that's next level again.
Okay. I was going to say, use the word tricky. Oh, no. We don't want to hear that.
Import. Oh.
I know. Import. What? No. Okay. Now, if I'm a brand new seller, do I need to set Google Analytics up from the get-go, or should I wait till I've been on the platform for a while selling already?
You should set it up and turn it on from day one.
Okay.
But until you are getting 500 visits a month or 1,000 visits a month, probably 500, you don't need to configure it any more than that. Just focus on getting visits.
Okay. And if I've been selling for a while already and I set it up now, will it be able to backtrack and get information, historical information, or will it just pick up from today with what's happening in my shop?
No, everything that happens in Google Analytics happens from the day you set it up.
Okay.
So that's why I say to make sure you have it in there from day one, because it will only start tracking from when you turn it on. But likewise, any of the changes that you make that I recommend only happen from when you do them. So if you do have the time or inclination to do them sooner rather than later, that's good. That's better than waiting.
Okay. So never really too late, but the sooner the better.
Yes.
Okay. And then I just forgot the question I was going to ask you. But for you as a fellow Etsy seller, what particular stats do you find most helpful in your own business?
Well, my shop is one of those little ones that I said just to get visits. So that's what I do. I just look at where they're coming from. But I mainly use my own Google Analytics to play around and to work out what the bigger shops need. Okay. So I do things like when I make a sale, I can go into Google Analytics and find that person, and then I can see the whole visit history of that person, which is what you can't see in shop stats.
Okay.
And that's a little bit fiddly. So I'm using that to try to work out how bigger shops could do that more efficiently, rather than having to spend 15 minutes doing it for every single sale.
I see. Now, what about Pattern by Etsy and Etsy Studio? Will this also include, will setting up Google Analytics also give us information about those two if we have those, or is it mainly just our main Etsy shops?
If the configuration, if the setting in Etsy applies to those as well, which I'm sure it does, or there might be a separate setting because I don't have either of those shops, then there'll be data in there, absolutely. In fact, if you're running two different shops, though, you'd want to have two separate properties in Google Analytics with two separate codes. So to have a different code in each setting, so for pattern or for studio. So Etsy Studio and your main Etsy shop would definitely be different.
Okay. And is that because in the world of the internet, they actually live in separate houses, if you will?
It's because if you're treating them as separate businesses, if you imagine if you had a shop front, would you be selling them in two different stores? Then I would have them in two separate Google Analytics properties. But if your pattern shop is the same as your regular Etsy shop, it's just that if that's your standalone one, then you could use the same little code.
Okay. So do you mind if we just talk more about the community or the monthly program that you're working on and what that will look like for people who want to maybe get more into the data and use data to make smart decisions in their Etsy shops. So every month, what can we expect? Do we work with you? Do we have collaborations with other sellers? What does that community look like, or what will it look like?
It will be a mix.
Okay.
My first 3 clients are going to be my special early birds, and they're going to be, I think I mentioned this, they're going to be helping me develop the program and working really closely with giving me feedback and telling me what they want to learn and all that kind of stuff. So as it develops, I'm really hoping that it will be a mixture, a hybrid of all these different kinds of ways to learn. So there'll be a few one-on-one consults each year. So talks where I give you advice, setting up custom reports and giving you little insights. And then there'll also be videos, more in-depth sort of mini ebooks on something that I might have blogged about, and here is how to do it even better, and with a whole lot more detail. Some tools that I might set up, some infographics or printables,
Okay.
spreadsheets maybe.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, so
Yeah, and then in the long term, once there's a bit of a group, then absolutely some sort of collaborative space, a Facebook group where you can pick the brains of other Etsy sellers and what they're doing with their data. That's definitely the way that I want to go.
Okay. When do you open the doors?
Right now.
Okay. All
It's
right.
ready.
Okay, so right now we can either choose to join this community and grow with you, or purchase independent products that you offer. And by products, I mean the Google Analytics setup that you offer.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And those you sell through your Etsy shop, is that correct?
Yes, the setup packages are through Etsy because you also get some helpful little package worksheets with it. There's a little intro packet, and then you get a customized mini ebook at the end about how to understand everything that's been set up.
Okay. One of the things I like that Genevieve said about working with you was that, one, she felt like she was working with a friend, but that aside, because it's always nice to work with someone you enjoy working with, one of the things she mentioned was that instead of guessing at, what type of marketing she needed to do or to whom, the information that she was getting from what you had set up for her and the data that you were mining for her helped her to make better, more intelligent decisions. And I think as sellers, that's important, because even sometimes using Etsy's promoted listings, it still kind of feels like we're shooting in the dark, like, because I've done it before and it gives you good information, but honestly, I didn't really know what to do with all the information I got from the promoted listings. And so it sounds like using this analytics tool might be better than promoted listings, but maybe give more focus and direction.
Yes. Well, the promoted listings section is the best one in Etsy because it tells you the revenue that you make from your ads, which is amazing. That's what we want to see. We want to see that for everything.
Yes.
But definitely, the more detail that you can see in Google Analytics, and then making sure that those reports are customized so that they only show you what's important to you and you don't get bogged down with everything else that's in there, because I think that's what overwhelms people when they first go in. There's 1,000,001 things in Google Analytics. It's huge.
Yeah.
You don't need to look at anywhere near all of it. So what do you look at?
And that's what you tell us.
Exactly.
Okay. Because I know I connected Google Analytics to the website for the podcast, convome.com. And you're right. Once it was connected and I went in there, first of all, it took me forever to connect it because I just, they're like, put this in the body or the header of your site. I'm like, where is that? How am I supposed to know where that is? And they're like, oh, or download this and then upload it. I'm like, no, don't make me do two things. Give me just one. And so for me, it was, it took forever to do it for that site. But once I eventually got it up and running, I think I had to call my web host and have them walk me through how to put the code where Google Analytics wanted it to go. And then once I got into the back end and I saw it, there was so much information. I think if I could have run out of the website, the Google Analytics account, I would have physically run, but I just shut it down because I was like, okay, I don't even know what I'm doing in here. And so it can, like you said, it can be intimidating, but having some help knowing, what we should be looking at will be helpful.
Absolutely. Probably the most important article that I have available is about how to measure success. And it is Etsy agnostic, so it's not just for Etsy sellers. It's not about what's inside Google Analytics. It's how to decide what you need to look at before you go into the tool. And if you have an idea of what you need to see beforehand, it can make that transition a lot easier. So it's about deciding what your business goals are and what are the numbers that you need to look at to meet those business goals. And then you can forget everything else to a certain degree.
Yeah.
You know the 5 things that you need to look at.
Yeah. On another topic, one of the things I think we just briefly talked about was this monthly program that you're launching. The method that you're using. One of the things you mentioned was that your first 3 members get to basically help you structure it in a way that will structure it and tweak it as you go, so that as more people join, they're signing up to a more improved product. What's your strategy, or why do you think that was a better way to go with basically launching before everything is as ready as you think it can be, as opposed to just having people come in there and help you just knock about the place and figure out what gaps you need to fill in and what things you need to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the approach I've taken with the whole lifespan of Artisan Analytics, and before I had the business name, just put it out there before I'm ready. Because I don't know for sure that what I'm giving people is what they want. And the best way to figure that out is to just ask and start talking to people and start working with people and then improve it from there. I could spend years working on this program and then discover that nobody wants it. But I don't want to do that. So I want to get people in who are going to be using it on a day-to-day basis and make sure that it's what they need to help them in their business.
Yeah, I like that. And I know by email we briefly talked about that, because I'm doing something similar. And one of my biggest fears is launching an unfinished product. It's never going to be finished because I'm going to consistently be adding to it and making updates. But just launching with what I feel like isn't enough to show, show to people or to the world. And I think that has kind of paralyzed me in a way, because I feel like it's not yet good enough, so I'm not going to let anyone in. And when you told me about the approach you take of, I know it's not done, but let me let people in and then let me grow it as, and get feedback from real users as I go along. I thought, oh my goodness, that takes such bravery. I should try it.
Well, it doesn't come naturally to me either. And when I first thought that a monthly program was what I wanted to do, I thought, all right, I'll launch it next year. But then, I don't need to do anything to launch the program. I just need to start talking to people. So I've written the landing page. All the information is there for people. And I did it in a couple of days and had it out there ready to start helping people.
Yeah.
But it's not what occurs to me naturally either. But you've got to remember that there are always early adopters, and early adopters are willing to try things that aren't perfect because they like to try new things.
Yeah.
And you only need a few of them to help you develop whatever it is that you're developing. And this can be applicable to things that people are making for Etsy as well.
Yeah.
You might start off by offering totally custom things, and then once you know what people really want, then you've got a fixed product that you start making.
Yeah. I like that, and I agree. I think part of it for me, and I think for a lot of other sellers, and I know a few people I've talked to on the podcast have that fear of, you put so much of yourself into something and then you're afraid it's going to get rejected by, when you show it to others, because maybe they don't like it, or it's not good enough, or, or maybe that's just something we make up in our heads. Like, well, maybe nobody will like it, so I'm just not going to show anyone, or I'm just not going to sell this thing I made because maybe it's not as great as I think it is or will be. So,
I think everyone feels like that a little bit. And so if you just put less of yourself into it before you put it out there.
Yeah.
You know, it's easier if
Yeah.
it's a small fail as opposed to a big fail. And then you learn and then you do it better next time.
Yeah. I like that. Lesley, thank you so much. Now, I forgot. What will it cost for anyone who wants to use your services or be part of your monthly membership?
The monthly program at the moment, if you're one of the early birds, the first month is free. It's just a consultation with me. And then you lock in $30 US a month for the first year. That's $30 a month.
Okay.
That seems really, really affordable to me. I'm really pleased that I've been able to get it to that price.
Yeah.
The full price is $35 a month if you're not one of the early birds, because it's not always going to be one-on-one consults with me, especially not if you're an early bird.
Mm-hmm.
But they'll be sprinkled in there throughout the program as long as you're with me. The setup are a little bit more expensive because it can take a few hours of my time to do that.
Okay. And I'll have links to those too, because you have 4 different ones, right?
Yes, depending on how much you need.
Okay. Sorry, go on.
Oh, no, that's all right. You can just link to them and then people can see what they are and what might suit them best.
Okay. Now, with the 1-hour consultation that early birds get, will that be you looking at their Etsy shop and talking things through, or will it be like a Skype call to discuss what their goals and what their goals basically are for their shops?
It will mainly be a call just to talk through their business, what their goals are. And then if there is time for me to jump in there and have a little bit of a look and see what I can see and tell them, then that can be included as well. Okay. So I'll pack in as much as I can. We'll also need to talk about what they want out of the program, and that'll be really important to be able to make sure that their next month is really valuable. Okay, I see. And plus, that will give you some insight if you start to hear the same thing from most people about how to tweak your offering too. Yes, absolutely. Okay. And if anyone wants to reach you or contact you, if they have additional questions for you, what's the best way people can get in touch with you? If you go to my website, which is artisananalytics.com.au, you can get in touch with me there about the monthly program or just in general. My email address is on there on the About page. Okay. Or we might put my email address down on the information about the podcast page. Okay. I will put it there as well. And if you're listening and you want to hop over there right now, again, Lesley's website is artisananalytics.com.au. Don't forget the .au part. And and I will definitely link to her website and also to her Etsy shop. Her Etsy shop again is Little Bone Collector. And so I'll link to that as well too. Lesley, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I'm glad we could make it happen. I too was worried about the time difference when I realized you were in Australia, but it worked out perfectly. No, it's very reasonable time here. It was only 8 o'clock in the morning. It's fine. Only. Okay, good. And I thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope this has been helpful to you. Again, if you have any more questions for Lesley, her website is artisananalytics.com.au. I will link to that in the show notes for this episode. I will also have her email in the show notes for this episode, so you can email her directly if you have any additional questions. And I will be back next week. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. You can subscribe to the podcast in iTunes, and while you're there, please leave a review too. Visit convome.com to leave a comment or feedback on this episode.
Hey, so if you finish listening to the outgoing music, you get this bonus. Lesley actually has a free e-course about Google Analytics and everything we were talking about. Lesley, can you tell us what that e-course is and how folks can get a hold of it?
Sure. So it's on my website at artisananalytics.com.au/get started. There'll be a link to it. And it's a 4-week free e-course that takes you through the basics of Google Analytics, a little bit of the Etsy specific configuration that we talked about, and then most importantly, how to take action. There's 4 or 5 emails just about how to interpret your reports and understand numbers, not be misled by sort of things that look important but they aren't. And it's all written in a way that's really easy to understand, no maths, and and is a great intro to start understanding how to make the most out of Google Analytics. And it's all free.
That's great. And it's by email. Will folks who sign up get an email every day or once a week? How is it spread out?
Yep. So the first week is 5 days, 5 emails.
Okay.
Then the next 2 weeks are the configuration steps. So that's just 2 emails a week because they're a little bit bigger and they take a little bit longer to put into action. And then the last week is again 5 emails, 5 days, because you're starting to just learn about how to interpret the reports. So after 4 weeks, you'll have set up Google Analytics, you'll have set it all up for Etsy, and you'll be well on your way to understanding how to get the most out of it.
Great. Thank you so much for mentioning that and for this free e-course. And if you're more of a DIY person and you want to jump right in there and start doing it yourself, this would be a good way to go. Otherwise, like I said, I will link to Lesley's Etsy shop and the products that she sells if you just want her to take care of it for you. Thanks, Lesley.
Perfect. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.